Here at East, we practice restorative practices.
Restorative practice is an alternative approach to handling people in organizations. And that's a really broad way of saying it, and I say it that way deliberately because a lot of times it's described as an alternative approach to handling discipline, but it's really much more than that.
Because we've started doing peace circling and because we've tried to promote peaceful problem solving, we now have kids that are coming and seeking help and support prior to something escalating to a point that true damage has occurred, and we can fix things and patch things and mend things before it gets to that point that is so difficult to come back from.
We came from a generation that like 7th and 8th grade was very hard. Like there was a lot of bullying, a lot of fighting, there was a lot of miscommunication between students. And then now it's like there's still miscommunication, but it's not as big as it was before.
A way that we've worked on building relationships with scholars is giving them an opportunity to sit and talk about how they're feeling, talk about their actions and some choices that they've made and how they've affected people in the school community or how they've affected themselves.
The way Restorative Practices and any other programs that got started here is we had training before we started. We had training in the summer. We had to practice with each other. And we had circles and restorative practices with each other well before the kids even seen it or heard of it.
Sometimes I might lead a restorative circle with a teacher and a scholar. Sometimes I'll lead a restorative circle in the classroom or support a restorative circle that the social worker or counselor is leading in a classroom.
Having restorative practices puts everyone on the same page. It takes away the power dynamics in the room, so you're actually with the students. You're actually creating an environment where students have the ability to tell you what's going on. That creates an environment where people can actually, instead of standing in front of the classroom and just telling you what's right or what's wrong, can actually be a part of the solutions and repair any harm. So not only does it build relationship, building relationship allows for things to be restored.
Students, they had frustrations that they want to say out loud and that they felt more comfortable saying in the peace circle because they knew everyone had an equal time to talk. So they felt more comfortable bringing out what their frustrations were, and then the teacher would say her frustrations, and then we would understand, and then we would end it with a nice conclusion, and then it would start getting better, small, day by day.
I think the greatest role that restorative practices have played here is in repairing relationships. I think in the past it was easy to dole out consequences and think that that was going to change things around, but in reality, after the consequence ended, there was no repair to relationships. And if you don't have the relationships that are strong and respectful in place, then it really diminishes some of the other opportunities for growth that are available.
It can be misinterpreted that when you're a restorative school, there's no punishment or discipline or any of these things. And that's a misunderstanding of what happens with restorative schools or programs. What we look to do is restore the relationships between people. So if, for example, a student curses out a teacher and throws a desk, okay, and they storm out of the room, they will receive a consequence for that, right? It's in-school suspension or whatever the consequence is.
The punitive system would send you out of the room, probably to the assistant principal. You might have to go to detention. If it was something more infractious, you might get suspended or whatever. So with the restorative approach, it's much more about, well, what just happened and why? And how do you feel? And it's a face-to-face interaction between different people that were involved in whatever that conflict was.
But the point is that there's been a harm done in that relationship between the student and the teacher. And before that student comes back into that class, the student and the teacher need to come to an understanding and repair that harm. So we would bring together the teacher and the student with a facilitator, and we would repair the damage.
With a restorative approach, it takes more time. It takes a much larger emotional investment rather than just like removing the problem. You are you are looking at that person as a person, not a problem. And you want to know, like, what happened with you today? But you also want them to know, like, this is what happened for me when you did that. So there's a sense of shared accountability. And it's fundamentally different than, as you can imagine, as just getting sent out.
Without that sense of trust, which is essential both from the students towards the teachers and the teachers towards the students, it's never going to be successful. And not in all cases, but in most cases, we've seen that trust develop. And that allows us to broach issues around restorative practice, that you are part of something bigger than you are as a student. When you've disrupted it, you have to try to make it better. And it's not about punitive. You know, I would argue that our kids have probably been punished enough in their lives.
And so I think this gives opportunity for restoration to repair the harm that was done, and so it's not recidivism to those behaviors and harms don't continue.
But the notion that the response to student behavioral issues should always be punitive just generates more behavioral issues.
It's about building community and building relationships that are sustainable in any culture. It's about culture change.